Good evening. Today, I just wanted to continue in Ephesians chapter 1. We had our Bible study tonight, and I feel bad, but I am unable to do a live stream of the Bible study, which I think would be fun. And I thought about maybe I could do a Zoom. If anybody's interested in being part of this Bible study on Wednesdays, let me know, and I'll figure out how to make it happen. But anyways, today, I just want to continue to share from Ephesians chapter 1, something else that I feel like the Lord opened my mind to. In verses 9 and 10, it says, in verse 8, wherein he has abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he has purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fulness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. And man, I just wanted to share what the Lord was showing me. And just talk about what he's talking about right here, because there's like a duality to it. It's saying, this right here, I don't think there has to be a duality to it. I'm sorry. In the dispensation of the fullness of times, he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. And the thing the Lord was showing me, I'm sorry for getting sidetracked, but basically, Jesus came down from heaven, right? He was in the Spirit. Like, he was already in heaven with God before he ever came to earth. When Isaiah had the vision that he had in chapter 6, he saw the Lord seated upon a throne. He saw Jesus. And we know he saw Jesus because in the Gospel of John, it says Isaiah saw his glory and spoke about him. So Jesus was the one seated on the throne that Isaiah saw. But I say that to say he came from heaven. He was spirit, right? And then he didn't have a father here on earth because he still was born of the Spirit, even though he came in the flesh. So like his spirit, who he is, was put into the body of flesh, but he still had to grow up as a normal human child. But even though we saw what he did when he was 12, he's like, don't you know I should be about my father's business? So he had an idea. I mean, he knew, because he existed before he ever came as a child, right? And he knows, he said to the disciples another time, I saw Satan fall like lightning to heaven. So he remembered being in heaven. So anyway, but he was given a body of flesh, and he had to experience everything we experience so that he could be a faithful high priest. And it says Jesus was tempted in all points like as we are, and yet was without sin. And it's important to know that when he was in the flesh, he was tempted. It wasn't like he faked it. Because in James it says, God is not tempted by evil. So it's impossible for God to be tempted. Jesus was tempted when he was in the flesh. So it's important to recognize that. But to continue on what the Lord was showing me, so Jesus came, he was flesh and spirit. But when he died, all flesh died in him. And but when he was resurrected, he was given a new body of flesh. But the things that are being reconciled in heaven and on earth, like the kingdom of spirit and the kingdom of flesh are becoming one. Not this body of flesh, but the new flesh. There is going to be a flesh that has the same feelings as we have now, but is incorruptible and eternal. But because we see that in Jesus, Jesus says to the disciples when he came, he wasn't a spirit. He says, I'm not a spirit. He says, a spirit does not have flesh and blood as you see I have. So when it's saying that he would reconcile and might gather into one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and on earth, he's showing us that he made the two one. He brought Jesus in the spirit and gave him a body of flesh, and then he became the first begotten of the new creation, the prototype, the protokia, the first preeminent. He was the first flesh and spirit, eternal being. Anyways, so I don't know if that made sense, but when he's talking about reconciling things, because God's going to dwell with men, and it's not just going to be a spirit kingdom, it's going to be a kingdom of flesh and blood, but eternal flesh and blood with no more death, no more sorrow, no more pain. And we see that in Jesus, because Jesus says, give me some fish. He was hungry, and he was in his new body, the same body that we're going to have when he returns. So, yeah, something to think about. And it's also important to note, it says he, when it says both which are in heaven and on earth, even in him, that's what it's in Hebrews. It says that it was necessary that the things in heaven had to be purged with better sacrifices than these, the blood of bulls and goats. So there is something about Christ's sacrifice that wasn't just sanctifying even us and saving us here on earth from wrath and bringing us into covenant with God. There was a purging of heavenly things with his blood, which is, it's just beyond comprehension. But that's why it says to ask for wisdom and to know this mystery. And I'm sorry I probably talked forever, but just wanted to share those thoughts, and I just think it's awesomeness. All right, I got more to say, but next time.